Hello and welcome. I'm Rashim Moga, and this is the Empowered Women of the World podcast, a podcast where we talk about technology, leadership, and success. In the last few months, I've received so many messages from our audience in over 50 countries for entrepreneurial best practices. Most questions focus on how to pitch their startup to VCs for funding. So today, we have Kat Kennedy, General Partner at Kickstart, to share insights on how funding decisions are made. Now, Kat is a technology leader and was the president and CXO at Degreed before joining Kickstart. She's passionate about building products, companies, and the startup ecosystem. Kat, welcome to the show.
Thank you so much. I'm so excited to be here today.
So, Kat, you and I met at ASU GSV Summit a few years ago, briefly. And at that time, you were at Degreed. I would love for you to share with our audience your journey from being a CXO and now being a general partner at Kickstart.
Yeah, I am more than happy to. So as you shared, I have been at Degreed for a decade. So joined the founders back in 2012 as first employee. At that time, I was working as a software developer, focused on the front end. But the delightful part of startups is once you're in it, you get to do all kinds of work. and that really was just such an exceptional position to be in, getting to grow a business and expand my own career along the way. And stayed there doing just that, growing Degreed into the unicorn that she is today and my career right alongside it. And the other beautiful part about Degreed is that it is venture backed. And along that journey, you just got to know the process of raising capital and working with the incredible partners that come to the table through that capital. And I really fell in love with venture-backed startups and just the concept of what you can do in terms of scale if you put the right amount of funding and the right partners at the table with you. And I always knew that eventually I would want to make the move to the venture capital side. I didn't anticipate it happening as soon as it did, but how it happened was just out of breakfast one day, networking, which I love to do, just love to meet and learn from great people. And one of the partners at Kickstart had reached out for breakfast, and we were just discussing, state of the world and careers and futures. And he asked me what I wanted for my own career. And I told him, my existing plans and how eventually I wanted to get into VC. And he let me know that they had existing opportunities. And even though, it wasn't the right time when we had that initial conversation, I stayed close to him and to the rest of the partnership. And eventually came to a moment in my time at Degreed where I knew, hey, I need to make a decision on if I'm committing to this place for another decade or if I'm ready for my next thing. And I just was ready for the next thing. And so reached out to Kickstart in that moment, and they were still ready to welcome me with open arms and hopped on over. But, really what led me into VC was just the incredible experience I had with Degreed's investors. They made all of the difference in our trajectory, and I hope to do the same for others.
So what does Kat's day look like now that you're part of a VC firm and you're a general partner over there?
Yeah, it's so different from operating. I will say that it's very, very different. Every week we have partner meeting on Mondays. So Mondays look very different than every other day, where we're just sitting down with the entirety of the firm, talking through our portfolio and new deals, discussing them and coming to decision on, if we want to back them, both in terms of funding and the just support that we provide. Those are Mondays. And the rest of the week looks very, very different from Monday. It can be anything from getting to know more people throughout the ecosystem here in the Mountain West, hearing pitches from startups, talking to the founders that we have already brought into the portfolio. Every day looks a little bit different, but it can be summarized as just spending time with new founders, with founders that we have already decided to work with, and then expanding our networks so that if someone decides, hey, we want to go raise capital, we're always top of mind.
So, Kat, I'm in the Silicon Valley. This is the hub of innovation. Startups are mushrooming every single minute over here. As you think about making investment in the company, what are some of the key aspects that you look for? And also, as you respond to that, I also want you to highlight or touch upon, like, people start worrying about funding very early as they start building their startup. What is the right time for funding? And sometimes, you might be better off without the funding as well. So weave that into the conversation, please, for us.
Yeah, I'll start with the last question. I'll answer that one first. Just deciding on if you want to take funding, I think, is the first critical decision. And there's different types of ways that you can finance your company. Deciding which path to go down, I believe, is directly related to the type of company you want to become. Specifically for venture funding, you are committing to becoming a hyperscale organization, large, global, at scale company. And venture helps you do that faster. We are committing to hyper growth in order to get you to hyper scale. That's where venture really comes into play. And that's wonderful for a lot of ideas and founders and companies. It's not the right fit for everything. And so the question I like to ask as people, come to me with that question one-to-one is, close your eyes, imagine what the world looks like in 10 years and what part your company plays in it. And if it is a hyper growth, hyper scale type of company, awesome. Let's talk about venture. If it's not, and you just imagine it to be like a really nice, beautiful business, but not at scale, venture probably isn't the right fit for you. So just imagining what the world can look like if your business is successful, I think helps you to decide what path to go down in terms of financing. With the right time, I'm lucky to be investing at the pre-seed and the seed stage. And pre-seed can be just an idea in your head. It can be an MVP of a product or a product that's real and in people's hands. It is all over the board what we see in terms of when people decide to come to us for capital. But often, even though they are at different stages in execution, they all have the similarity that they're ready to throw some scale at this idea and at this company. They're in a moment where they're ready to start growing more quickly than they have been able to do without that funding. So the right time is when you're prepared to commit to this thing for the next 10 years and throw a lot of growth at it. That's when you should come to us for funding. And then the key aspects that I look for at the stage that we are deploying capital, which again is pre-seed and seed, the earliest checks usually, often the first check-in outside of friends and family, is founder first. And what I have a little checklist that I go through because I'm just a type A type person, and I'm going to pull it up in the background so that I've got it. But I'm evaluating founder on, do I believe they're high integrity, they're going to do what they say they'll do, and that they're always being candid with me so that we can really have a relationship of trust. I want to know that they are the person to chase the opportunity that they're presenting. There's something special about that opportunity and how they relate to it, that they're willing to risk it all to chase this idea for a pretty significant amount of time. And I just want to know that when things get tough, because they're going to, that they are so committed to changing the world through this idea in whatever small or major way that change will happen, that they can push through the hard things. There's other aspects like, do I believe they can recruit a team? Do I believe that they're going to be able to fundraise later on? But, first and foremost, it's just, why is this the person to chase this idea? And do I really trust that they have the resolve to do it? Behind that, once I believe in the founder, is the business idea. Do I believe it's a good fit for venture? Do I believe that the time is right to execute on this idea? Oftentimes it's a great idea and it's just not the right time for the market. And so I believe you have to have both the great idea and the right timing, and the market needs to be ready for what you bring forward, and that you have some sort of advantage to the existing offerings out there today. Why will people choose your solution over everything else that's already out there? And your ability to articulate that opportunity and how you can seize that opportunity today. Those are the things that I'm always pushing for in the first meeting. But 90% of it is that I have confidence in the founder, because in the early days, you might have an idea, you might, be chasing an opportunity, but the amount of pivots and adjustments and learnings that you're going to have along the way are vast. So founder analysis is weighted more heavily than anything else exponentially.
And really at that stage, at pre-seed and seed stage, when you were just working on your MVP, your product and your solution is going to change multiple times. So many times, the idea that you start with is not the idea that you bring to the market.
Yep.
Right?
Yep.
There is going to be so much market research. You're going to get early feedback. Your product is going to look very different from what you had envisaged early on the PowerPoint. So those are some very good points, Kat. Thank you for that. I've been part of a few pitching competitions, at Tycon in the Bay Area and a few others, and have seen founders stressing so much about creating a perfect pitch deck. So many times they're under so much pressure that they even forget what's the why behind it. Why did they start on this journey, and forget to articulate it? So from a VC's perspective, Kat, what are the components of an ideal pitch?
I love when I can sit down with the founder and we don't have to look at slides. Honestly, I do. If they are so capable of articulating the story and the why and why they are the person to pursue this opportunity, if they can explain that to me just sitting down in conversation, I appreciate that as much as anything. Slides should be used as a guidepost to better enable you to tell that story. Like, use them as a support mechanism. And I think if we change our view as like, you're not checking off a list of things that absolutely must be in that deck, instead flip it. Like, they are a mechanism to help support you in your conversations with VCs. And so imagine a scenario where you sit down on the plane, the nice little pleasantries that we sometimes do as we sit down, and the person next to you is one that could write you a check. What does that conversation look like? What do you anticipate their questions to be, right? And so walk through that imaginary conversation and have that be what's in your slides, those supporting points that you really want to stick with people. But they should be a support to a conversation. They should not be a narrative that you just read out to people.
And that the PowerPoint deck shouldn't drive the conversation.
Exactly.
It's a leave behind material in my mind to keep your audience engaged, but the impact needs to come from you.
Yes.
And so often I personally feel that the why is missed. Like, why did you start this business? What were you thinking of when you said, I'm going to make this big leap? Because entrepreneurship is a lifestyle change, Kat. It's not something that you do on the side or you do just for the sake of. There's a whole mindset change that's required once you become an entrepreneur. And so thanks for sharing that and breaking that myth that it needs to be a standard deck with these 5-7 elements.
Yeah, no, not at all. I want to hear your passion for this opportunity. I want to hear why you're the person to chase it. And if there's things that you really, really hope I remember from that narrative and that story, put those in a deck, as you said, as a leave behind material. But no, I'm not looking through a deck and frustrated with why they didn't have a fully fleshed out TAM. right? Like I'm not looking for that at the pre-seed. I want to know the story and why you, and if you have a team ready, are the people to chase it.
So you obviously receive a lot of funding requests every week. I'm sure your mailbox and your LinkedIn messages and your cell phone is full of requests. What is the best way for founders to get your attention and to connect with you?
You know, it's hard to choose one because I have found they catch my attention in a myriad of ways. You know, the way that they catch my attention is they articulate their story in a way, no matter how they're reaching out to me, that I catch a glimpse of what the world could be if they're successful. And so I would say storytelling is the way to get my attention. And that storytelling can be done if you find me at a networking event, if you're emailing me, if you're sending me something on LinkedIn. I get a lot of messages that are like, hey, would love to chat with you about my idea. Like, no, that's not the type of stuff I'm responding to. You know, I respond to someone who says, you know, years ago, I saw this opportunity. I've been chasing it. You know, here's everything that I have done to execute against this idea today. Would love to talk about how you can help me continue to chase this goal, right? Like that is an ask that gives me enough detail that I understand the opportunity at least a little bit. You have shown me that you are already executing against it. It's not just an idea. And that you know how venture capital can support you in your execution. You know, that is a message that will resonate across the board. And if you do have a deck, I would encourage you to send it. Like we look at those. I think oftentimes, especially early days, we're concerned that people will share that deck, that they'll steal our idea. But the thing you learn as you really dig in as an entrepreneur is that ideas are a dime a dozen, execution is not. And even if someone sees your deck, their ability to execute against it likely will not be there. So I would encourage everyone to share their decks more openly in order to catch attention. You know, and it's all about storytelling and helping people get excited about what you're up to.
Yeah, it's interesting you mentioned that because I often say people can probably steal your idea, but they can't steal your plan to execute on that idea. And the success is the right combination of idea and execution. Without execution, as you said, ideas are always available. They're always somebody. We have a bright idea a few times a day, but not everything can be mapped to a startup.
Yeah, so I would just encourage you, like, don't worry so much about the information getting out there and the proprietary nature of your idea. Like the real meat of it happens in the execution. And in the early days, that magic of the right person, the right idea, the right team to execute is what makes the difference. And so to get people's attention, I would encourage you to share more openly.
Well, thank you so much, Kat, for joining us today and sharing your experiences and your insights with us.
Oh, it was such a pleasure to be here with you. Thanks so much for having me.
Thank you. And today's resource for you, my dear audience, is the link to the eWOW videos on Startup Journey. I'll put the link in the show notes. As always, thank you for joining me today, and thank you for loving, liking, supporting, and sharing the podcast. Remember, sharing is caring. I look forward to seeing you again in our next podcast. Till then, keep empowering the world.